Ladies and gentlemen, let's get into the video. If you're interested in a graphics card for 1080p resolution, you can't wait until next year with HBM2 GPUs, you might well be interested in the R9 380X. It's essentially a fully fledged Tonga core and is going to be retailing at around $250 US. It's popped up on various websites and we've heard much about it over the last couple of weeks, but the card is once again listed on a Korean website, and from what we understand, it will finally be unveiled to the public on November 15th of this year, obviously. Essentially, it is a beefed up version of the R9 285, which we've recently reviewed. Now, the 285 features a Tonga Pro, whereas the 380X is the full Tonga core, and therefore has a couple of extra compute units. It increases the number of compute units from 28 to 32, meaning an increase in shader numbers from 1792 to 2048, and thus, of course, TMUs also increase as well from 112 to 128. More specifically, clock speeds crank up also. Now, we don't have an exact core clock figure, and we don't have memory clocks either. And some of this obviously will be down to the manufacturer. For example, MSI might decide to have different speeds than, let's say, Sapphire or ASUS. However, we're most likely going to be looking at a computing performance of around 4 T-flops, which is a considerable leap over the 3.3 or so that the R9 285 managed to provide. And is still using 256 bit bus, not megabyte, 256 bit bus. But the primary difference is the amount of RAM has been increased quite significantly to 4 gigabytes, whereas the 285 generally came with just 2 gigabytes, which obviously in 2015, heading into 2016, that's a bit of a pinch, and you'll notice quite a few games now are actually listing, yeah, you can get away with it, but probably not the best idea, Sonny Jim. Bandwidth also will naturally increase, providing the clocks increase for the memory. There is some ambiguity there. The effective clocks are supposedly going to be between 5500 to 6000 megahertz range. 5500 was the same as the R9 285, so hopefully we can see an increase in the clock speed. It has to be said, in our testing of the R9 285, it was actually fairly overclockable, and this goes for both the core clock and the memory clocks as well. I'm having one of those days, aren't I? That's not good. Unfortunately, there's less known regarding either TDP or power connectors. You may recall, or you might not recall, depending on your knowledge of the R9 285, I suppose, that the original Tonga Pro had a TDP of 190 watts with two 6-pin connectors. Now, obviously, the card is still going to feature the same PCIe 3 interface. It's still going to have most of the improvements that you would associate with the Tongas, for example, advanced color compression, slightly better tessellation, that type of stuff. But essentially speaking, it is a replacement for the 285. Obviously now AMD are moving into the 300 series, and therefore the 200 series is, I guess you could say, end of line. The reason I'm really interested in this card is I think it's going to be a great GPU for those who are looking for a cheap upgrade to tide them over until, let's say, mid next year, when we know that the new cards are going to come out. So let's just say, for the sake of argument, you might have an older card now. You might say to yourself, well, let's say you've got, I don't know, a GTX 660 or GTX 670 or something along those lines. Maybe it's getting either a bit long in the tooth, or maybe it's dying, or maybe you're just getting into PC gaming and you want a cheap GPU until the new ones come out, which is actually a pretty decent idea. Well, in which case this is a pretty good card for you, particularly if you're playing on, once again, only a 1080p screen. And let's face it, a lot of TV screens, you know, you might have, for example, the 40-inch plasma in your room, which might only be 1080p and 60 Hz, in which case you probably don't really want to upgrade to anything super duper amazing at the moment. but you've got that option. So I think this card is going to be really nice for those who are looking for a 1080p screen, a decent frame rate, because it should be a couple of scoots, I guess you could say, over the 285, in which case it should place it in the territory of around the 380 to the 390, and the 390 is a really good card, and it should actually be quite competitive with Nvidia's offerings. Nvidia are actually a bit weak in this area because they've got the GTX 970 and they've got the GTX 960, and the 960 is a killer card. It's a lot cooler than, let's say, the 380, but the offset is, once again, you've got a lot less memory. However, vendors are now starting to release only 4GB models, and that's the plan for them to phase out the 2GB models of the 960, because they realise it's just not enough. From what we understand, for example, about Syndicate, they are advocating, they're highly suggesting that you should go with a 3GB GPU. That's not to say that, once again, you can't run it on 2GB. You certainly could, but you might have, for example, instances of frame rate dips because obviously memory, or rather the GPU's memory, is being thrashed, and therefore it's having to page out to the actual system's RAM, which obviously is not particularly great for performance as you're careening along in your horse and car. Anyway, hopefully you've enjoyed the video. I'll see you soon. Take care. Bye for now.